Good evening. Ira Epstein with your metal market wrap-up, and this wrap-up is for the evening of Tuesday, and we're here now at the 20th of August 2024. You know, I'm watching people outside my place right now. It's about 6:15 at night. They're walking down. President Obama, Michelle Obama, they will be speaking tonight at the DNC, and so many of the dignitaries are just walking down the street in front of our home. We have a home, not an apartment building. And, you know, it's interesting. Last night, as they were having President Biden speak, and you saw, of course, so many other, Hillary Clinton, we were looking at all the bulletproof cars that were parked on the street by us, and they double parked them. I guess the police were letting them do that. Very interesting to watch all this. Only 14 people arrested on the first day of the convention. Given all the hoopla that was supposed to be, all the problems, I consider that a huge, huge win. Very well-behaved people so far. In the stock market, we're sort of flat right here. The gold market, as you know, I still think 2,600 is a very realistic number. The silver market's losing a fraction to gold tonight. Copper came up, and I have a report as to why the copper came up. I didn't realize a bunch of things, but we'll get into that in a minute here. Let's first talk about what we have coming up in the morning before we get too far. The Mortgage Bankers Association numbers come out at 6 in the morning. This is what I want you to focus on. At 9 o'clock in the morning, this is a report you don't get very often. We're getting a revision. It comes out 55 to 75 days after a quarterly report. So this is for the second quarter. And it's going to give us numbers on the payrolls. Now, the difference is this takes a look at state unemployment, and it throws away, in some manner, remember this, unauthorized migrant workers, because they're not on those numbers. What's the number going to be? The word is that, according to Goldman, Wells Fargo, number of analysts, anywhere between, right now, from what I can see, 300,000 to 1 million jobs have been overstated. If that's the case, then the labor market's weaker than we thought. And how will the Fed react to that? If the numbers come in not as bad as thought, well, that tells you another story. So I think this report is a bit of a shocker. Now, there'll be a final revisionment to all these numbers for this year. That comes about in February. But this is a big report right now, especially since we won't get another revision like this in front of the September FOMC meeting. And so you're looking for that large decline. We're going to get the minutes tomorrow at 1 o'clock of the last FOMC. How unanimous were the voters at the meeting? What were they looking for? This gives you an idea. Are we looking at 25 or 50 basis point potential first rate cut? Then we're going to get the EIA petroleum stocks, and they're going to come out at 9:30 in the morning. So it is an interesting time in the markets. I mean, a super one. Now, had you closed up today in the S&P, it could have been the 9th day in a row, especially in the cash market, and you haven't done that in decades. So the market backed off, and I wrote this morning to my traders, I said, don't be surprised if, you try to break most of the day because it was a Tuesday reversal day, but you don't go very far, and you could even recover ground into the close. It wasn't too far off. In the gold market, just take a look at where you're at on a weekly chart on a closing basis. You're up another 0.5 percentage point, up $12.50 for the week so far. You can see how the market's been working higher. It started with the higher lows, I think you see them, and the higher highs. You can just see this crystal clear with the swing line. We then look at moving averages, and this market's above it, and even now on a hard break, the 18-day average so far has cleared now the last break low. That's a very positive sign. A number I always look at, and I want you to look at, and we'll talk about at the end here, is how to use Bollinger Bands. Bollinger Bands work in an interesting way. Markets will trade within them 95% of the time. When the market breaks out of sideways action, it often goes to the band, and in order to push out of it, you got to keep hitting that band. Well, if you hit it more than 4 days in a row, I call that a gorilla glue trade. And it's when it latches on, and what it tries to do then is pull the slow stochastic in time and get that to embed. Once this embed, think of this like a turbocharge on a car. It's sucking in more air, the buyers are the air comes in, and the market tries to rush to the upside. It's a good way to talk about that as to what it does. So I see the trend is up. I would not tell clients that you buy a Bollinger Band because you only stay over at 5% of the time. But on the pullbacks, especially if we get to the embedded stage, you want to look at that. And at the end of this, take a look at how I teach Bollinger Bands. I talk a little bit about it right at the end of this video. You can see how that you swung back down on the spread, and silver has been gaining on gold since that happened. And as you can see, the silver market is fighting a battle at the 100-day average in green and the upper Bollinger Band. That's the area you're bouncing back and forth. And again, you have a market that has gotten up to an area that is overbought, not embedding though at this stage. And copper's doing very much the same thing. Now, copper's come up because people don't realize that, and I didn't either. China very quietly changed the game in July. They allowed about 10 cities, not the mega cities, but large. Remember, in China, when you talk cities, you can be 15 million people. So they took 10 cities, and they said to those cities, we're going to let market forces dictate how to move new homes. New homes could be a condo, a standalone. It's typically condominiums in most of these areas. And what happened is prices fell between 13 to 29%. Now you'd say, well, that's a terrible thing. Well, is it? Because when the permits come out by China to build a home, what they do is they set a price. And what that is that's not a market price. It's what the Chinese government calls a market price. Well, resales can be different, but not new homes. So what this is doing is, number one, it's bringing tax revenue, much needed revenue, back to the local provinces where this is taking place. Number two, you're starting to move product. Number three, a lot of these are unfinished pieces. That's how things are typically sold in China. The money's given to the developer, you pay, he finishes the project. Well, that's going to demand copper usage. I don't know how much electricity, I don't know how much they have done. I'm certainly not a builder there, but I read. And that's what's been going on. And then all the areas that have to support that. So copper's been coming back, and this only began in July. This answers why this market in August, when that happened, I think, came back up. You may have more information on it than I do, but I read about it, I wrote about it, and I'm pretty convinced that is what we're looking at right there. In the platinum market, you've come alive, and there's another thing backing all this up. Forget China. If we start on the rate cutting and the dollar drops, which it's doing just on the anticipation of it, metals that are priced in dollars, well, suddenly you can buy more for the same dollar. Think about that, because the dollar's falling in value. That gives a bid to this. Number two, you cut rates to spur on economies, right? That's what you do. If you do that, you use metals in it. I'm not just talking platinum, I'm talking metals. So these are things to think about. In the dollar index, you can see how the market has been coming down straight on through here. It's not embedded yet, but it might. And tomorrow's going to be an important day for the dollar when we see the revision to that second quarter payroll number. What are they talking about in numbers there? Now, the other interesting thing in gold, you know, in a lot of the central banks, how they move gold around, I'm sure you've seen it on TVs, especially the spy thrillers, when they break into the banks and they steal these huge, heavy bars of gold. There are 25-pound bars that are typically moved from Vault A to Vault B, Vault C to D, and so on. For the first time, they were worth $1 million a bar. Pretty interesting at the current prices. All right. You've got to pay attention to these Bollinger Bands. They're key. Get yourself geared up. Take a look at this. You can just click on at the top here of the video, and it will take you to our Bollinger Band course as well. I'm Ira Epstein. I'll catch up with you tomorrow. Welcome. I'm Ira Epstein, and I'm here to talk about my enhanced Bollinger Band course. Now, many of you have taken my regular charting course, and if not, you might think you know something about Bollinger Bands. As you know, Bollinger Bands are an algorithm designed to keep the market trading within it 95% of the time, and on a chart, it will offer on the top part resistance, on the bottom support, and the idea is the market will travel within them. We know that sometimes it latches onto that band, goes up or goes down. Well, how do you play with that? Can you pyramid the positions off that type of thinking? Well, I've applied all three of these into 13 different videos that teach you my concept of it. And from that concept, you're able to work with weekly charts and or daily charts. The 13 videos, each about 7 minutes long. The idea here is not to put you in school forever, but to teach. Now, if you haven't tried my complete futures research, I throw that in as well. Whether you've tried this or not, I think it's worth taking a look at. I think you're going to learn something from there. That research, by the way, covers twice daily market updates for you and access to what I call window envelope numbers, which I think are very important when looking at these Bollinger Bands. The next part is a trial to our charting software so you can make your charts look the same way that mine do. It's that simple. Where do you go with it and how do you get all this? It's simple. You go to our website, www.iraepstein.com. If you go to the word education, everything you need is answered there. You can also call my staff. They'll be happy to help you get set up. I'm Ira Epstein, on the road to your education.